My parents took my college fund and gave it to my cousin, so I cut them off, got rich, and sent them a bill for everything they owe. I'm a 19-year-old guy who thought I had a normal family. On the surface, we looked like any other household Sunday dinners. Birthday parties, the occasional family vacation where everyone plastered smiles for pictures. But behind those smiles was something I never wanted to admit. My cousin, Evan, was the golden child. It didn't matter what I did. Somehow, Evan always managed to shine brighter. If I brought home a B, my parents would sigh and say, "Why can't you be more like Evan?" He just got straight A's again. When I scored the winning point in a basketball game, Mom clapped politely. Then immediately launched into how Evan was the captain of his team and colleges were already watching him. It was like my life was just a stage for his spotlight. I told myself it didn't matter. I worked hard, kept my head down, and believed that when it came to something big like my future, my parents would be there for me. Money was always tight. Dad worked 2 jobs, and Mom took every overtime shift she could. I overheard arguments late at night, whispers about bills and debt, but whenever I asked, they reassured me. "Don't worry about it. We've been saving for your college fund since you were a kid. You're covered." That promise became my anchor. No matter how small I felt compared to Evan, I held on to the idea that my parents believed in me enough to secure my education. I imagined the moment I'd finally escape this constant comparison, prove myself, and maybe even earn their pride. At least, that's what I thought, because even back then, deep down, I should have known the truth that their promises weren't meant for me. And soon enough, I'd find out just how far they were willing to go to remind me of my place. I think the first time I really noticed the imbalance was when I was 8 years old. For Christmas that year, I unwrapped a second-hand action figure's paint already chipped, one arm loose in the socket. Evan, meanwhile, tore into a shiny new gaming console. I remember the way my parents' eyes lit up as he plugged it in, like they were the ones who bought it for themselves. "He deserves it," Mom said, patting his shoulder. When I asked why I couldn't play too, she snapped, "Learn to share." But Evan never had to share anything. That pattern never changed. When I brought home a spelling bee trophy, Dad set it on a shelf and never mentioned it again. The next week, Evan scored a goal in soccer, and suddenly it was all anyone could talk about. Our boys going places, Dad bragged to anyone who would listen, even though it wasn't even the championship. I'd sit there, smiling stiffly. My own achievement already forgotten. There were smaller humiliations to the kind, about build up like bruises you can't show anyone. When Evan visited, I'd be ordered to give him my room while I slept on the couch. If there was dessert, he got the biggest slice, and if I complained, Mom scolded me for being selfish. Family comes first, she'd remind me. Though somehow I was never included in that definition of family. Still, I kept trying. I studied harder, practiced longer. Tried to laugh off the jokes about how Evan was the son they always wanted. I thought if I pushed myself enough, if I became undeniable, they'd finally see Manad as a shadow, not as a backup. But as their son, I didn't realize back then that the deck had been stacked from the start. And the higher I climbed, the easier it was for them to push me back down. When senior year rolled around, I finally felt like all the late nights and sacrifices were paying off. I still remember the day I opened the acceptance letter. It was from my dream school, the kind of place I'd only ever imagined myself walking through in movies. My hand shook as I read the words "Congratulations," and for once, I thought maybe my parents would be proud of me in the way they always were with Evan. They were, at least at first. Mom cried, hugging me tightly, and Dad slapped my back with a rare grin. "See, we told you that college fund would be worth it," he said. For a brief moment, I let myself believe it was true that all those years of being second best were about to mean something, that maybe they had saved because they did believe in me after all. I started daydreaming about my dorm room. My classes, a future that was mine to shape. Friends congratulated me. Teachers shook my hand, and I walked around with a lightness I'd never felt before. But when the financial aid forms arrived, the cracks began to show. "Can I see the paperwork for the fund?" I asked one night at dinner, trying to keep my voice casual. Mom avoided my eyes, fiddling with her fork. "We'll handle it," she said quickly. Dad muttered something about banks and interest rates. When I pressed again, they snapped in unison. "Don't worry about it, we told you it's covered." Something in their tone made my stomach twist. It wasn't reassurance. It was dismissal, the same tone they used whenever I questioned why Evan always came first. For the first time, I felt a sliver of doubt pierce through the excitement, but I pushed it aside. I told myself they were just stressed that everything would work out. Because after all these years of being overlooked, I needed this to be real. I had no idea that hope was the biggest setup of all. The truth hit me on a Tuesday night. Sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of financial aid forms spread out in front of me. I needed exact numbers from the college fund, so I asked again, trying to stay patient. Dad exchanged a look with Mom before sighing like I was asking for something ridiculous. "There's nothing left," he said flatly. I blinked. "What do you mean nothing left? You told me my whole life you were saving for this." Mom waved her hand like it was no big deal. "We used it." Evan needed help with tuition and his startup idea. He's the one who's going to make something of himself. "You'll be fine, you're smart, you'll figure it out." Her words sliced through me. My chest tightened, and my ears rang so loud I barely heard myself say, "You gave my college fund to Evan." Dad leaned back, crossing his arms. "Don't be dramatic. It's all family money anyway. Besides, you can work, get loans. That's what kids your age do. Be grateful we could help your cousin when he needed it." I felt sick. Years of being second best had prepared me for disappointment. But this was different. This wasn't just favoritism, was theft. My entire future ripped away and handed to someone who had always been placed above me. Tears burned in my eyes, but I swallowed them down. "So you lied," I whispered. "All those years, you lied." Mom's expression hardened. "Watch your tone. We did what was best for the family. You'll understand one day." But in that moment, I knew I would never understand. The people who were supposed to protect my future had sold it off like it was nothing, and that was the night something inside me broke. I spent the next few weeks in a haze, clawing for options that kept slipping through my fingers. I applied for every scholarship I could find, begged banks for loans, and picked up shifts at a dingy diner where grease clung to my clothes long after I clocked out. No matter how many hours I worked, the math never added up. My dream school, the one that had felt so close I could taste it, started drifting away like smoke. Every letter from the financial office was another nail in the coffin. Meanwhile, Evan strutted around like a king. He rolled up to family dinners in a brand new car, bragging about the laptop he bought to help with his business. He wore clothes I could never afford, flashing a watch that probably cost more than my tuition deposit. And the worst part? My parents beamed at him, gushing over every detail. "See how well he's doing?" Dad said proudly. That's what happens when you invest in the right person. When I came home after a double shift, uniform reeking of fried food, Mom wrinkled her nose. "You look pathetic. Stop being dramatic. College isn't everything, you'll figure something." Out her words cut deeper than the exhaustion ever could. I wanted to scream, to tell them how much it hurt to watch my future slip through their fingers while they applauded Evan's every move. But instead, I swallowed it down, letting the anger simmer under my skin. Nights blurred together, me staring at acceptance letters I couldn't use, while Evan posted photos online of campus parties. captioned with thanks to my parents for believing in him. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about being erased over and over again until there was nothing left of me but the shadow they wanted me to be. And with each passing day, that shadow started to feel permanent until the night Evan decided to rub it in one step too far. It happened at another family dinner, the kind I'd learned to dread. Evan strolled in late, tossing his keys onto the table like he owned the place. The jingling was loud, deliberate, meant to show off the brand-new luxury car he'd just bought. I tried to ignore it, cutting into my food quietly, but he leaned across the table with that smug grin. "You know," he said, tapping his watch, "your money paid for this? Feels good to have family who believes in me." The room erupted in laughter, my parents included. Mom actually clapped her hands. "He's just teasing," she said, but her eyes sparkled with pride. Dad shook his head, chuckling. "That's our boy. He's the future of this family." Something inside me snapped. My fork hit the plate with a clang. "Future of the family," I repeated, my voice shaking. "You stole my future to give it to him. Do you even hear yourselves?" The laughter died instantly. Mom's smile dropped, replaced with that cold, familiar glare. "Don't be ungrateful. We made a choice. Evan will make something of himself. You'll find your own path." I felt heat rise up my neck, my hands trembling as years of humiliation, dismissal, and betrayal boiled over. "No," I said, standing so fast my chair scraped the floor. "You didn't make a choice. You made it clear I'm not family to you." I never was. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. For the first time, they had no quick insult, no excuse. Just blank stares as I grabbed my jacket. That was the night I realized blood didn't mean loyalty. That was the night I stopped begging for their approval. And as I walked out, swore to myself I'd never give them the chance to break me again. The weeks after I left home were brutal. I crashed on a friend's couch at first, clutching a backpack with everything I owned. Rent was out of the question, so I took whatever work I could get late-night diner shifts. Unloading trucks at dawn, handing out flyers in the scorching sun. My hands blistered, my back ached, and I lived off instant noodles and stale coffee. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Meanwhile, Evan's life looked like a highlight reel. Pictures of him laughing at college parties popped up on social media, his shiny car parked out front. He wore crisp clothes, traveled for networking events, and posted motivational quotes about chasing dreams. Every time I scrolled past was like salt rubbed into an open wound. He was thriving off the future that had been stolen from me. While I was scraping together tips just to afford laundry, but in the middle of all that exhaustion, something shifted. For the first time, my life was mine. No one was controlling my choices. No one was telling me I wasn't enough. Every dollar I earned, no matter how small, was mine to keep. I learned how to stretch $20 into groceries for a week. I learned how to fix things instead of replacing them. I learned how to rely on myself in ways I never had to before. The bitterness never went away. Every bruise on my hands reminded me of what they'd done. But it fueled me too. Each night, walking home under flickering streetlights, I whispered to myself, "This won't be forever." I didn't know how or when, but I knew I was building something stronger than they ever imagined, because while Evan had everything handed to him, I was learning how to fight for survival. And survival, I was starting to realize, could grow into something much more dangerous. My lucky break came from the last place I expected, the diner. One slow night, after hours of balancing plates and refilling coffee, I sat in the corner scribbling numbers in a beat-up notebook. It was my way of staying sane, tracking tips, budgeting, calculating how long it would take to afford classes on my own. A regular customer, an older guy in a suit, noticed me muttering over the pages. "You like numbers?" he asked, sipping his black coffee. I shrugged, embarrassed. I like making sense of things. Money, patterns. It calms me down. He leaned forward. You ever thought about applying those skills somewhere bigger than this diner? That question cracked something open in me. He gave me his card. He ran a small logistics company and needed someone detail-oriented to help with data entry. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than hauling boxes, and it gave me access to something I hadn't had in a long time. Opportunity. I poured every ounce of anger and hunger into that job. Within weeks, I was streamlining spreadsheets, catching mistakes others overlooked, even suggesting ways to cut costs. My boss noticed. You've got a sharp mind, he said. Don't waste it. For the first time, someone was praising me without comparing me to Evan. That part-time gig turned into more hours than a mentorship. My boss taught me about business systems, investments, the kind of things Evan only pretended to understand while flashing his parents' money. I devoured it all, staying up late not to worry, but to learn, and through it all. My parents never called, never asked how I was surviving. They thought they'd buried me under the weight of their betrayal. What they didn't realize was that I was quietly learning how to build something they could never take away. The grind didn't magically get easier. It chewed me up before it gave anything back. I worked days at the logistics company, nights doing odd jobs, weekends tutoring kids in math just to keep the lights on in my tiny studio apartment. There were weeks I couldn't afford proper meals. Nights I fell asleep, hunched over a laptop with spreadsheets glowing across my face. But every time I thought about quitting, I saw Evan's smug smile, his shiny watch. My parents' proud voices calling him the future, and that fury kept me going. Then it happened. My boss handed me a contract, my first real freelance project, managing financial data for another small business. The check was more than I'd ever seen in my account at once. Holding it, I felt something I hadn't in years: control. It wasn't just money, it was proof that I didn't need my parents, their lies, or Evan's shadow to define me. Confidence started creeping back into my bones. I invested in myself, learned coding, took online classes, and slowly built a reputation for being reliable, precise, and fast. Word spread, and with each new client, my name carried more weight. I wasn't just surviving anymore, was rising. Meanwhile, whispers about Evan started to surface. His startup burned through money like water, and the car payments piled up. Friends told me he'd failed 2 courses and was partying more than studying. The golden child was starting to tarnish, though my parents refused to see it. They still bragged about him on Facebook, posting pictures of his staged success while ignoring the cracks forming beneath. I didn't say a word. I just kept working, stacking small victories into something bigger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I was building a future they couldn't touch, and deep down, I knew the day would come when the balance of power finally shifted. By the time I turned 22, everything had changed. I wasn't rich yet, but I was steady, comfortable income. My own apartment, savings tucked away, and clients who trusted me. The same kid who once begged banks for loans was now the one advising small companies on how to keep theirs afloat. For the first time, I could breathe without feeling like the world was about to collapse on me. That's when the calls started. First, a missed one from Mom, then a text from Dad. We need to talk. I ignored them until one evening my phone lit up again. This time it was Evan's name, and out of morbid curiosity, I answered. His voice was shaky, nothing like the smug cousin I remembered. They told you, right? About the money. I hadn't heard the details yet, but I stayed silent, letting him ramble. Turns out his big startup had gone under. Most of the college fund, the money that was supposed to be mine, had vanished into scams, overpriced equipment, and nights out dressed up as networking. He'd flunked out of school months earlier, but hadn't told anyone. A week later, my parents showed up at my door. They looked smaller somehow, like the weight of Evan's failure had finally crushed the pride out of them. "We need your help," Mom said, wringing her hands. Dad added, "Family sticks together. You've done well for yourself. It's time to give back." I almost laughed in their faces. These were the same people who told me I'd be fine, who mocked me for struggling, who sold my future to someone else and called it love. Now they wanted me to save them from the consequences of their own betrayal. But instead of anger, I felt something sharper: clarity. The tables had finally turned, and this time I held the cards. I let them sit in my living room, their eyes darting around like they were searching for a version of me they could still control. But the truth was, that kid was gone. I set down a folder on the coffee table, the kind of folder you'd expect from a lawyer. Not the son they'd written off years ago. "What's this?" Dad asked, frowning. I looked him straight in the eye. "It's the bill. For everything you owe me." I flipped it open, printouts of my acceptance letter. The financial breakdown of the college fund, the cost of tuition and living expenses I should have had covered. Then I added the hours I'd worked instead, the loans I'd been denied, the years of emotional damage I'd carried while they handed my future to Evan. "This," I said, tapping the pages, "is what you took from me." Mom's voice cracked. "We did what we thought was best." "No," I cut in. "You did what was best for Evan. Every gift, every compliment, every dollar went to him. And where is he now? Broke, flunked out, living proof that your golden child wasn't gold at all." Evan squirmed in his chair, face red, but for once he had no smart remark. "You don't get to beg me for help now," I said calmly. "You made your choice. You chose him over me. You chose lies over love. And now you live with it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom's lip trembled, Dad's shoulders sagged, and Evan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. For the first time, I wasn't the one humiliated. They were. I gathered the folder back into my hands, stood, and opened the door. "We're done here," I said. "And just so you're clear, I don't forgive you." And then I closed the door on them the way they'd close-slayed on me years ago. Cutting them off wasn't as clean as closing a door. For weeks, I carried the weight of what I'd done, questioning if I had gone too far, if blood really did demand forgiveness, no matter how deep the wound. But the longer I sat with the silence, the lighter I felt. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval, their scraps of attention, or their broken promises. My life belonged to me. I built a circle of people who cared because they chose to, not because they shared my DNA, friends who cheered my wins, mentors who believed in my potential, and clients who trusted my work. I decorated my apartment the way I wanted, cooked meals that tasted like freedom, and woke up every morning knowing no one could take away what I'd earned. Did it sting when I heard Evan had moved back in with my parents, broke and bitter? Sure, but it didn't surprise me. The same people who once mocked me for hustling were now stuck with the very person they bet everything on and lost. As for me, I mailed them the folder one last time, the bill neatly itemized. At the bottom, I wrote, "Paid in full by me. Don't contact me again." Then I blocked their numbers, because the truth is, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet power of living a life they said you'd never have. And in the end, my success was the only answer they'd ever get.